Welcome to the Honest Designers Show, your transparent look into life as a modern designer. My name's Tom Ross and I'm the founder at designcuts.com, and this week I'm joined by fellow Brit and expert hand letterer Ian Barnard, American retro design expert Dustin Lee, and the ever-talented South African illustrator Lisa Glanz. In this week's episode, we dig into everything to do with your portfolio. As designers, our portfolios are like our shop front for the world. And this week, we really go deep with what makes a great portfolio, the steps it takes to improve what you currently have, how to present your work in the best light. And we also kind of think outside the box when it comes to how social media is beginning to kind of take over as the new modern day portfolio in many respects. This is a good one, and there's lots of actionable tips to implement. So let's get into the show. So this week, we're talking all about how to make your design portfolio as good as it can possibly be. And I'm going to preface this episode by saying, I think designing your own website and your own portfolio is quite possibly the most difficult thing to do as a designer. I don't know if you guys agree.
Oh, I totally
I always
agree.
found it
Totally agree.
it's a billion times easier, right? When you're designing for a client,
Yeah.
and then suddenly it comes to your own work and you just hit that creative block every time. And I don't know what it is.
I think it's just too many options. It's like, I don't know, being a kid in a candy store and you can only pick one candy. It's horrible.
Yeah. I feel like if there's anything that will crush your confidence in your work or your excitement about design, it's building your own portfolio. By the time you come out of that, you're just like this withered version of yourself.
Yeah, what kind of color defines me as a person? Right? You should never ask yourself those questions.
And doesn't it seem like it always turns into like a 2-year-long process, and it's just a reserved site, and it says like we're building something awesome, and it's like been there for 2 years because it's such a hard job.
Yeah.
The thing is, it takes you have to sort of do the copy as well, and you're like, I don't know, it's selling yourself. And you're like, I don't know what to write. I do design because I like doing design.
Well, you got those really sexy pencil pictures of yourself where people are throwing pencils at your face, which is super cool.
Yeah, but then you have to put stuff, it's having a profile picture and then having all the other stuff that goes with it.
I just think you need to stick to, if you struggle to write, I think you need to stick to that quirkiness and be really super basic. I mean, that's what I would play to your strengths. I wouldn't try and become this copyright guru overnight. I'd be...
No, maybe I think Tom mentioned in the previous episode about if a constant question keeps coming up, then make a video of it rather than
True.
having to keep
Which you're good at.
rewriting.
Yeah.
What, and that's your portfolio?
No, yeah.
They just come to the site and it's like a really, yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like, I always wonder because like some people do their portfolios where they are very much customer centric. We make things for specific type of person, blah blah blah, and they start to describe that and describe how they're going to solve the problem. Other people are like, this is me. Here's why I'm weird. Here's why I'm different. Here's what I do. And I'm never sure which way is the best way to go. It seems like I see it work well both ways when it's done well.
I think as long as you put in your first sentence, I'm an award-winning designer.
Yeah, my mum printed me a certificate.
Yeah.
I've got it on the wall. I think Lisa's right. There's too many options because I've done this before and I've literally scrapped what I'm doing about 10 minutes in and done that about 20 times in a row. So I had one where it was just like really minimal and meant to be sleek, but it was basically just a gigantic photo of my own face with like a menu over the top of it. And I was like, that's terrible. What was I thinking?
Yeah.
And then you go down another road and it's like, that's not working. And you go down another road, it's like, that feels too big and corporate. That's not me. And this feels too like whimsical. And yeah, it just seems to have zero direction. So I don't know. Should we let's maybe circle back to that difficult element. Let's at least try and provide some tips and positivity for the listeners to get the ball rolling.
I tell you what, this would have been a perfect episode to get a sponsor on who does portfolio sites.
That's true.
Or we could go like sponsored by, and then one of those template companies.
Yeah, and then we could go, well, I use, and then we could redub like you've been had to dub the end of the last one because it cut out. We could just like, oh, I really like using this one.
Yeah, insert here.
Yeah, I think it depends. Like if, because I mean, there's obviously a lot of angles to this. It's either we can discuss the content that you put into your portfolio or the actual look of the whole thing, how it's put together. So
I think why limit ourselves, Lisa?
what?
All of the above.
I'd like to start off by something that we spoke about in a different episode about a different topic, but transfers over to this one, which is put out the work or put out the content. And this, it can be portfolio content or content you just put to social media of the stuff that you want to get in. Because
100%. Yeah.
Yes, good tip.
Because like people say, oh, I saw your work, I saw this, and I saw that.
Yeah.
And it's from you putting out and make it clear what you do. Because the problem with being an all-round designer is that you can just put a bit of everything, but it makes it harder for a client coming to your site to say, well, actually they do too many things. They might not do that one thing really well. And so maybe nail it down to a few things that you really either enjoy or really good at and put those as the main focus, even though you might do a lot of other things, have those as the main aspect of your website that they see the first. And then it can be the case that, you get that job and then say, oh, actually I can do this other bit, the branding, or I can do the website, or I can do that. I think, you want customers not to have to think too much when they come to your site. So,
yeah,
I agree. And I think we've all been on those portfolios where they have a little scroller and it's like, click here for my branding work, click here for like more logo work, click here for web work, and then illustration. And this kind of links back to what we talked about finding your style, niching down and that kind of thing. I always find it a big turnoff, and invariably when they spread themselves too thin, most of it actually looks quite average. And so I always just think, wow, this looks like every other designer out there. Whereas if I went on one of your guys' portfolios, it's very much like, oh wow, like Lisa, she's amazing at illustration. Like Ian, he's amazing at lettering. Dustin, I'm not going to leave you out, but you don't really have a portfolio right now.
I consider my site and Instagram my portfolio.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, they are. And again, you've niched down. It's retro. So maybe it's not possible for everyone. But like Ian says, even if you do multiple things, maybe focus on either the main one which you want to attract that kind of work, or perhaps whatever the door opener is. So if you find generally you always land people for, I don't know, logo work, but then that tends to lead to website work, that's fine. Put the logo work on your portfolio, get those people in the door, and then you can upsell them on the other stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's like what Joe was saying last week. She's more confident doing the chalkboard stuff, and that gets her foot in the door. And then when she, interacts with them, then it's, menu design, it's logo design, it's, so that it definitely, as you said, and you got to start with your strongest or the stuff that you enjoy the most.
Yeah. And if you go back to the builder, because we have to.
Oh, he made it in. That's early.
I've forgotten the builder's name.
I'll have to think of one.
Bob.
Bob the builder. We said that last time.
Yeah.
Is that you have a builder who can do, most builders can do sort of general stuff, but then you get some people that specialize maybe in loft conversions, or you get them in doing
Electricians.
I'm more talking about projects, I suppose.
I was trying to reference in your skills from the past, but
I know. Well done.
Former life.
I haven't used it for a long time. And I suppose, who are you going to choose over a builder who does a bit of everything? And so they sometimes do loft extensions, but not all the time. Whereas a company that does all they do is loft extensions, you're going to be more confident with people who do it day in, day out than you are sometimes I did a loft extension last year, last November. I haven't done one since. And so you're like, that they could do it, but you're like, oh, there's probably someone else better. And that's that sort of impression. You sort of think, actually, I want to go for the specialist who just does that, rather than the person that might, has it in their skill set but doesn't do it all the time, sort of thing.
If you think about what your dream client would probably search for, they're probably not going to search for graphic design generalist or something like that. If you do lettering, they're going to search for lettering. If you want to do illustrations for big periodicals like New York Times or whatever your dream is, they're going to be looking for a very specific type of illustrator. So if you're doing all this broad stuff, you're going to end up getting local businesses with very low budgets that need you to do every single little part of it for next to nothing.
I think generally what looks really bad is when people try and put everything they possibly can onto their portfolio. So it's like not only every type of work they do, but it's every project they've ever done. And it's like the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I don't know what people are trying to achieve by doing this. I think it's like, look at me, I'm really popular, I'm in demand, and I've done an awful lot of work. But their inability to be selective with that, like I really would advocate for quality over quantity. And some of the best portfolios I've ever seen have 3 or 4 examples that are super focused. And because there's less examples, it's not like a big grid of overwhelming choice for a potential client to kind of pick through. It's much more in-depth case studies where it's like, you know, testimonials from that client and like really nice mock-ups of that particular project, and they really kind of show it off like a incredible looking presentation instead of just here's like a dump of everything I've ever done in the last 5 years.
Especially if you show, because the other thing I wanted to mention, which is always a nice thing to add if you can, is show the process of how you got to that. You know, say you're a specialist in logo design, showing how you actually got to that end design is very interesting for clients, and it also shows them that you are thoughtful and you think things through, and you know there's a reason behind the design. And even if you only do, as you said, Tom, even if you only do that to like 3 projects and go full on, like show the process, show your inspiration, show maybe the different changes and then the end result, I think people will be so inspired by that and actually build confidence before you even, you know, had contact with them. So I think that's quite important as well.
You have to think like a client, really. You have to go in and think, okay, the client just doesn't want to see stuff that looks good. They want to say, okay, how can I trust this person? Are they, you know, because some people could just get templates and just put their working template and put it on their website.
True.
And they want to know that actually they made it themselves as well.
Yes.
They're not, you know, because you're coming into this as a client, coming to your website, you're coming into this, okay, I don't really know this person. I want to be able to trust them. I want to know that their work's original and not just a knockoff thing. And, you know, the money I pay, I get, you know, they're going to work on it. There's going to be sketches. There's going to be a process back and forward. So, yeah, I think it's like with all the senses when you're trying to communicate something, you have to think that with the client, they're going to be coming at it afresh and just how they feel when they go to your site.
I think people like a story as well.
Yeah.
So
makes it
kind
more
of
human.
similar to showing the process, but you know, don't be afraid. Possibly get the client's permission, of course, but don't be afraid to kind of share their brief in a concise format. So be like, here's the kind of thing they were after and how they described their brand, and therefore I came up with this. Here's some of the process. Here's a testimonial midway through, which is relevant. So if the client is saying they were a dream to work with, like, you know, at first I thought we nailed it, but then they got me on the phone and we had a really in-depth chat and we pivoted slightly, and then they took it to the next level, and that was all off their back, not me pushing them. That would be the kind of testimonial which you would put alongside some of the process revisions. So it's like their words are supporting the visuals at that stage of the project, and then you kind of weave along this thing and get to the end result, and that's where you weave in the testimonial of, oh, by the way, we launched and this did amazing things for our brand and it's a resounding success. So by weaving in the testimonials and the images and your process and the kind of documentation and mock-ups into this story, it actually creates an emotional response instead of, oh, they do some work and it's nice. It ticks a lot of boxes of, okay, here's what they're like to work with clients. Here's why they're an authority at what they do. Here's how their experience shows. This gives me insight into how it's going to be when we work with them potentially. Like it just gives so much more than like, here's a flat image showing a nice looking design.
When I was doing all client work, I remember the biggest mistake I made was not asking enough questions. I would give them a questionnaire to fill out. I would talk to them on a Skype call, but inevitably I would work on the project and then show them something, and we had not understood the words in the same way, because oftentimes as a designer, you might think of a word one way, but as a client, you think of it another way.
That's so true.
And so when they say, oh, well, I thought you're going to do this. And then you discover the two words you were talking about are totally different to each person. So the biggest mistake I have constantly made when I was doing client work was not making it crystal clear on every single part of what they wanted and understanding what was important before I started and wasted a ton of time.
Yep. And it's a waste of time, which, as we've talked about, time is money. So it's a waste of money. It's going to be frustrating for them. It's going to hinder the process from both sides. So yeah, communication is key. I would actually say a good idea is, once you've wrapped up the project, send them a little form asking for feedback, and don't be afraid to be somewhat leading with this. So if you know your portfolio is laid out in a way that you like to perhaps weave the story of the early stage and the mid stage and the final stage, don't be afraid to ask questions like, how was the process working with me for you? How did you feel about the final accomplished project? Have you had any benefits or upsides as a result of this new design? And questions like that are going to really kind of lead them into saying really the stuff that you want, but obviously with their own words and facts, and being genuine through that.
So true.
And scary. Like, I think that's so important, but it's so scary.
Yeah, but at least it
Yeah.
teaches you and tells you so much stuff that you assume a lot of the time, and you could be off track, so it's a good thing. The other thing I thought of is that many people make the mistake is that they don't review their portfolio often enough. So you might go into somebody's website and they've got stuff there from 2008, and it just looks terrible.
Yeah, because it moves so quickly, right?
Yeah, and it is easy to kind of forget to do that. I mean, I've been guilty of it when I was, at graphic design full time. So, yeah, I think it's important. I know we've mentioned this before, but you definitely got to just put your best stuff out there. And the more you grow as a designer, which you should be, your style's going to change, your look's going to change. So then take that old stuff off, because it's actually not relevant anymore, unless, of course, it is still relevant. But 9 times out of 10, it won't be. But yeah, I think
or tuck it away. Like, sometimes it's a good part of your story, but like Tom was saying, or Ian was saying, you want to put out what you want to be doing now.
Exactly. Yeah. No, definitely.
I think also that if you're redoing a design, there's the company or the client who employed you are getting a new thing. It's not. I mean, they're getting like a rebrand or a refresh of their website or their logo. It's good to show the before and after. But because one, it shows maybe how dire it was before and how better it is now. And because I'm just thinking about like people who do fitness stuff, having clients showing their before or after help other clients, possible clients, aspire. Go, oh yeah, that's what I want. I can see that this works because of this is what they were looking like before, and this is what it looks like now, and it looks so much better. Sometimes you need that comparison, otherwise it's just here's the design, and sometimes you need something to compare it to see that actually this is really good.
Completely agree. And I would also say to use stats and figures where possible. I think I've talked about this before, but that's the easiest way to sell what you do, because we obviously care more than the clients usually about just how nice and pretty stuff looks. But when they know it's going to help their business, that does the best job possible to sell your services. So if you're showing like the hideous before and then the very attractive after, that's enough to suck them in. But then if you see below that, it's like, here were the, under the ugly one, it's like, here's the problems they came to me with and the problems we identified in our discussions. And then post redesign, they saw, a 50% increase in sales and, a 30% increase in customer satisfaction, and all these kind of empirical figures, if you can possibly get them. And I would say it's worth digging and asking for them.
So true, because don't you think if you can convince the person buying from you that it doesn't cost any money because what they're paying for will essentially pay for itself and then some, it becomes really easy to sell a client, because it stops feeling like you're paying anything. I've experienced this with so many things, right? Like you buy a new computer for your business, or you update your software, do whatever, and you're like, well, this is actually free because it pays for itself in terms of
exactly. Yeah. I mean, you could really boil this down to your portfolio should do 2 things. It's your first impression of a couple of seconds, so put your best work out, and you need to build trust also in those first few minutes. And if you got to think of ways, how do you get that feeling of trust across? And it's things like that, stats. It's showing befores and after. It's showing results. I think that's very important.
Also, I suppose what's changed now than it wasn't 3 or 4 years ago, is that your social media profiles are
Yeah,
more
that's true.
prominent than actually your website. Your website is where people go once they've sort of taken an interest in your work, and then they need to contact you.
Mm-hmm.
I've found that my Instagram was one of my biggest things to get work rather than actually my website. But what you can do is also, once you can, if you're doing regular posting, really good, but also then go back. This is a friend of mine, Stefan, goes back and deletes posts that don't really fit in with the overall theme of the feed. So you sort of look through it and go, okay, he sort of neatens it up. So when people, new followers come along, or new clients who start following you, look at your site, there's this coherent message or coherent style that's coming across.
That's interesting.
Which is really true, because like sometimes I go, you go to you find someone new on Instagram, you have a look through their feed and some of their previous work, and you see, and I think that some of the people that do really well are those who curate their feed and have a certain style, a certain look to their photos, certain look to the way they compose stuff, and I think that really helps the client say, okay, they are consistent. They're not just posting pictures of their children or food or whatever it is.
Kitties.
I think didn't you actually say one time that you'll literally stop following someone on Facebook if they put too many pictures of their kids and the food they're eating?
Yeah, on Instagram. Yeah, the thing is, I follow people for inspiration.
Yeah, me too.
So and they're mainly people who do something different, or are in terms of, like, I feel like they're a better, higher level than me, so that I can push myself and I can try new things and get inspiration. But if all my feed is to constantly pictures of food or pictures of legs on a beach,
that doesn't help.
Hot dog legs, you seen that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it just doesn't.
I'm with you, Ian.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I think it's worth touching on for a second the nature of social, because I agree it is almost like the new portfolio, but it's so much more fluid and live compared to a website portfolio, traditional portfolio, which is much more static, I think. So we're talking about the need to update your website portfolio, but social is constantly updating. And really, as I say, it's a more live, fluid version of a lot of what we've talked about so far this episode. So instead of it just being one case study, it can be an evolving thing. So instead of it being you showing the process on your website, you are showing the process live. Like, you quite literally could do a live video of you working on it, or you could do an Instagram story of you working on it, or you could do multiple bits of content of the process coming together. And then you could do you having lunch with a client, or you could do visiting their office and seeing the signage or logo you designed on their wall, and them celebrating their new brand and be part of that. And the whole thing's a lot more in the moment and a lot more emotive than just a static web page. So I think both can work, and perhaps a web page is better for like funneling Google ads to drive clients or something of that nature. But social is definitely, it's just kind of brimming with life compared to the old style format.
That's true.
And the thing is, it still boils down to the biggest thing that trumps everything is relationships. So, you and a client come together as a relationship, and that's the ultimate thing over everything else. And so, making yourself be, like when you view someone maybe on YouTube for a long time, you get to know them. And it's that sort of thing. You want that relationship so that when they get in contact with you, they feel like they know you, and they feel they know what your work is, how you go through your work, how you deal with the client. If you can get that over through social, then that will help them get over any barriers that might be in their place to stop them from hiring you.
I feel like when you're especially if you're not a gigantic company like the New York Times or Wall Street Journal or whatever big company, some big fancy shoe company, and you don't have an unlimited budget, you want to see real strong consistency, which is, I think, why a niche works so well, because you don't want it to be like gambling where maybe I'm going to spend $2,000 and get something killer. Maybe I'm going to spend $2,000 and this time he's going to bomb it. If you can see just consistent work, like, Lee says, and it's always this certain style, you can give Lisa $2,000
when you get some bunnies.
Yeah, she's actually doing a special right now. She'll literally do your entire design for $20. But
Really?
Yeah, yeah. Should we just plug her email address? And see what
Yeah.
happens?
that you can just Google her,
Imagine
find her,
that.
contact
Imagine
her.
that.
$20 for full branding projects. But
Yeah, she won't sleep a lot, but she will add to her gigantic stack of money, which we have to get in every episode.
But you know what you'll get, right? And it's kind of like Ian. Like you see Ian's stuff, and it's all different. But you know, Ian's so consistent. Like if you pay him, you're going to get Ian. You're not going to get some weird ass surprise.
Yeah.
Not Ian physically. You're just going to get Ian's word. Ian
I'm
starts
the
laughing.
biggest believer with everything that quality over quantity is the answer, and it stuns me how few people seem to get that.
Yeah.
And we actually had a listener of the show, and a very talented designer. I don't know if she'll mind me plugging her store. Hopefully not, but she's called Elisa. That's Elisa, not Lisa, by the way, Lisa. But yeah, lovely Spanish lady, and she stopped by our office today, and we were kind of looking through some of her products, and her last product did so much better than anything she's done, and it's because she put much more time into constructing it, making it bigger and more comprehensive, really pouring time into the previews. And it's that thing of like, do you do one big hitter, or do you do 5 or 6 kind of smaller, quicker things? And I was trying to say, like, take the time to do the big hitters, and the same thing goes for your portfolio. You would much rather have one, even just one standalone huge project that like you knocked it out of the ballpark, compared to 10 quick ones.
I think so. And I also think if you is spending that time on that one big one, if you can call it that, you actually get into it better, and you tend to produce better results. So even if you are going to literally choose 3 projects that you've worked on for your portfolio and that you really want to dig into and give a kind of behind the scenes look, that is better, because you would spend more effort and time, and you sort of collect all the data and all the information that needs to go, and really put together a really good post or entry into your portfolio about that. That would be way more impressive than a whole lot of little, crappy little logos that you did quick fire. I mean, that's horrible,
Completely.
So here's a good way, though. I think you can kind of get a good balance of these, and I do this with my business. But I have friends that have done this with design too. So for instance, I know someone named Nick Brito, and he'll do a challenge, and he'll say for 60 days, I'm doing, I think, workout illustrations in Illustrator. So every day he did one. Each individual one is pretty cool, but when all 60 were done, it's just this amazing, massive body of work. No pun intended. But it's all these amazing illustrations of this person working out, right?
Yeah.
And so like when I'll make products, a lot of times I'll say, well, I want that instant gratification because I'm the type of person that needs to have some sort of gratification more quickly. And I'll make a little product, and then you get a bunch of them and you assemble them and you have something big. Plus, when you do it that way, you get the instant feedback of being able to adjust and make the next part better and go back and adjust the other one without having to go back and do everything.
That's why it takes me so long to put out products, because I do exactly that. I'd rather spend the time. I mean, I spend quite a lot of time on each product because I want it to be, really top. And I just think that the smaller kind of quick ones, you don't get the opportunity to really dig in. And you also don't really get the opportunity to really put yourself in the customer seat. I know we're talking graphic resources, but, the same for designers. Like, you really need to think about their experience when they're dealing with you or dealing with a product or whatever. So I think the more time you spend on a project, the more you're going to get to know it. And I think that's a better way of doing it.
I find it really hard doing big projects.
Really?
Yeah, I struggle with being able to keep up the motivation.
Me too.
Over a long period of time. And I don't know whether I'm more like Dustin. That's maybe why me and him were like releasing products every 2 weeks.
I don't know how you did that. I just don't know how you did
I know, and we did it for quite a long time as well. I still can't believe it. That's probably why I'm not doing it anymore, because I just sort of, burnt that. I could just about get one out a month now. And I think for me, it needs to be in small chunks, because that's how my personality goes. I get obsessive over something for a small period of time, and then I have to move on. And whether that's a project or you know, where they're at. You know, it's like with ClickFree, I got obsessive over a short period of time, like 6 months, but that has now, you know, I then went on to a different style of ClickFree.
Yeah.
So that's probably why my portfolio is so, you know, I know you can see it's me, but I chop and change because I can't stay on one thing for a long period of time. You know, some people can find a style, like Lisa, for instance, she can find a style and continue to do that and continue to push it and to keep grow it. Whereas I have to go, okay, I'm going to write on motorcycle helmets now. Okay, I'm going to be doing stuff with Corollas now. You know, it just has to, you know, I have to jump from one to the other and just, I think if you're in touch with what you're like,
Yes.
like self-awareness of who you are and how you work, I find much more freedom in the fact that I might be given 3 months to do something and I'll leave it to the last week.
And maybe that's the key, is like understanding who you are and not fighting against it too much.
Yeah.
Because some people are like Lisa, and they can grind it out for, you know, 3 weeks or 2 months making some project for a client or a product or whatever. And some people are like, I find myself more like Ian, where by the time 3 weeks has gone by, I'm ready to move on, and I might just forget about what I did. And I have done that. I have all sorts of things that I've never done anything with, because you just are like, it's time to move on. There's nothing wrong with it. I just don't. I just have no more interest.
I'm actually the same as you guys. It's just that the difference is that I
Have more money?
Oh, you think you're better, huh?
no, I just think because I also get very easily bored. And when I have I'm trying to do an update to one of my products, and it is extremely time consuming and quite laborious. So I have to sort of dot nice things throughout my day that isn't that. So what I do is, although I'm still working on the same project, I do little things in between that are fun just to keep me motivated. I don't know.
Do you find that it helps when you like really keep your mind on the money? I feel like you do a lot of that. You just keep your mind. You're like, when you're getting tired, you're just like, keep my mind on the money.
Yeah, just go count some stacks of it and then return to what you're doing.
Yeah.
That must be nice, actually, to have that break.
Exactly. You know, the pile that's in the corner of my office. You know, I go and sit and count it. Yeah.
No, I could see it. It's bigger than last time. Damn.
I wouldn't put any fans on, otherwise it'd turn into like one of those grab a dollar or whatever.
No, but I do for fun. It's great fun.
So I've had quite good insight into the portfolio thing recently, because the design agency who we share an office with, they just literally did a complete overhaul and redesign of their portfolio.
Oh.
And I hadn't kind of done that myself in a while, so watching that was really, really interesting to see how it should be done. And so I would be remiss not to kind of, you know, mention a few of their techniques, because I think it hopefully will help people. So one is that you should position the ones in the portfolio, as Ian said earlier, the kind of work that you want to get. But beyond that, it should be the kind of client you want to get. So it shouldn't be as simple as, well, I want to do graphic design, so I'm going to put graphic design. It should be, well, if I want big corporate clients, then I need to put my biggest, most corporate clients up. Because if I don't, then my ideal customer is going to land and go, yeah, this isn't for me.
Yep.
So it's not just as simple as the type of design. It really has to be the type of project and client.
Correct.
I would also say, and this is possibly the more boring bit for designers, but very, very essential, you need to get a bit mathematical about it. So you should have Google Analytics, at least, on your portfolio, and you should start looking at conversions. So you need to see, okay, where's my traffic coming from? What's my conversion rate? So for every 100 people, do I get 2, inquiries and then convert one of those to an actual paying customer? And you need to be tracking at least that very basic data. And then that lets you scale up things like if you're doing Google ads, Facebook ads, or whatever, LinkedIn ads, you can say, okay, so I spend this much, I get this many people, I get this, much client work, and that paid for the ads and then some. But having an idea of that stuff really helps. And then looking at stuff like your bounce rate on the site, tweaking that, and all of that stuff then goes into split testing. So for anyone listening who doesn't know what that means, it's where you kind of randomly show one of 2 versions of your site to visitors, so you can statistically see which is better. And that's great because suddenly you can test which gives you a better conversion rate. So it'll be like, oh, great, when I have a photo of my team or myself on my contact page, I can see that twice as many people contact me as opposed to when it's faceless. and you should constantly be running that stuff.
I gotta go off on a little thing about that because I'm curious. I'm curious what you think about this, Tom.
Of course you
there
are.
it is.
The most curious.
I really am. I did A/B tests for the longest time, and the
Yep.
A/B testing software started telling me. I think I was using maybe Optimizely, something like that.
Mhm.
And the
Yep.
A/B testing software typically says to get, and this is true, to get statistically significant results, you often need tens of thousands of viewers on a page. So, for instance, if I was to A/B test a product, you're just not getting that many people. And it might seem like when you see the results, oh, well, this is telling me that the product or this page should be this, should be the version. But I know from doing tests on my email list where I do have 30,000 people on it, which is a statistically significant number, that oftentimes it will look one way, and then all of a sudden you hit a certain amount of clicks, thousands and thousands and thousands in, and all of a sudden it starts to shift and you realize the truth was not that. So how do you deal with the challenge that most people with portfolios are not going to be getting tens of thousands of people onto an about page or even their homepage, maybe not even for the whole month, their entire site?
Okay, so this is interesting because I actually disagree, but I think it's good to get this pushback sometimes. So I am not a statistician, but
Woof, that was a
any
hectic word.
people I got through that just about. Any people I've talked to who are really hot on this stuff, they actually say the opposite, and they say the whole point of statistics is that you should be able to infer. So the more data you have, the more accurate it becomes, but it should basically point you in the direction, but just to varying degrees of accuracy based on the volume of data. So the whole point is that you can infer from small samples. That's why people, do that nationally. There's companies that mine data and they get 20,000 people or 2,000 people, and then they infer hundreds of millions of people's habits based on that. And it's not 100% accurate, but the whole point is it's at
General.
least accurate enough to give value to that data. And similar thing with Matt in our office, who runs this creative agency I'm talking about. He does split tests all the time for his clients, and most of them don't have nearly as much traffic as Design Cards, but still they've been able to get better and better and better results by relying on the data from that. So I actually wouldn't trust what you were told by Optimizely.
Well, the thing that backed it up for me in a lot of ways was that the MailChimp, when I was actually doing that and doing A/B tests, I would see for myself, like I could see thousands and thousands of people and see that the early results were not always the case. But to lend credibility to what you're saying, because I think you make a good point, is that most of the time the early results do tend to reflect the later results. I've noticed you just have those outliers where all of a sudden something crazy happens.
Yeah, I think if you have 7 people visiting, you really can't get anything from that. Because it could just be luck. It's like, oh, well, that one person kind of liked this for whatever reason, but that really holds no relevance. But I think if you're even dealing with hundreds of people, there should be at least enough to kind of start you off in that direction. But yeah, as I say, like even before you get to split testing, I would be looking at that basic data. So how many people, think of it like a funnel, right? How many people are landing on your portfolio? How many of those get in touch? How many of those turn into customers? And you need to move people through that as effectively as you can. And ultimately, if I'm being like brutally harsh, nothing else matters. Like even if you feel your portfolio is twice as ugly, but it's converting twice as many people, that's the one you should be going with for your business.
Right. Yeah. Or sometimes the things you think are so great are not the things that your clients think are so great.
Yeah, that's another way of putting it. So yeah, a lot of the stuff that's appealing to clients maybe is not gorgeous to designers, but that doesn't matter because that's not the purpose of your portfolio, to give yourself a pat on the back. It's to get you more clients.
Yeah. I guess it's what, going back to that episode we spoke about dealing with non-designers, you got to think like they would think, not like how designers would think. So
make it pop more.
Yeah.
That's the ultimate portfolio tip.
Yeah.
You had said though, when I was talking about how do I track like my interaction with clients, and you said, well, you get a sense for it. And I think that's true. If you mix A/B testing or all these different things you're doing, you get a feel. And when you first said that, I really wanted to, I was like, oh, I can't do that. I don't know if I can trust it. But then I did start doing that and really paying attention. And I don't think I would just rely 100% on it alone, but like I could tell. I started doing the social with that fidget spinner act. And I saw the social rise, and I was like, okay, the interaction is clearly getting stronger because I did that. And I don't need a test to tell me that that was the case. Like, clearly in my gut, I know that's what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, as you say, you kind of combine all of your various senses and data points and intuition and everything to get the whole picture. But I think being keyed into that alone is an important step, because I know so many people, including me, years ago, where I would put up a portfolio and I would leave it and I would think job done.
Mm-mm.
And that is just not true. Like, once your portfolio is there, you should be constantly refining it. You should be trying to drive traffic to it and get people looking at it. You should be monitoring how people convert on that. You should be thinking outside of it in terms of social and what else you can do there. Like, you should be trying to push for better and better case studies and testimonials. And, it should be an ever evolving thing. I don't actually think it's enough just to revisit it once a year or once every 2 years. It just becomes static otherwise.
I think we're all guilty of that, though. Like, mine hasn't been touched.
Oh yeah, we are. It's so. Well, I think part of it is it's such a big, horrible project, as we said at the start of this episode. Once it's done, it's like, oh, thank goodness for that. Like, I can just leave this thing.
That's what's so beautiful about the social media and things like Ian's is, if I wanted to learn what Ian was doing, I would never go to his portfolio. I'd go to his Instagram, because you just see all these little tiny mini movies almost of his life. It's cool.
You do, and another benefit of social being your kind of second portfolio is it has much more scale opportunity. Like, people generally, they're never going to share your portfolio website unless it's something truly spectacular. Like, it's just not share worthy enough. But stuff gets shared all the time on social because it's integrated into those shareable platforms.
True. Although I guess it kind of starts to switch around if, like, say you're a web designer, then you almost have to try to bring more people to the website at some point so they can see that you make good websites.
Yes. I've got a final point, just thinking about the agency portfolio design, which I've witnessed in our office recently.
Yeah.
They were very good at ensuring that everything led to the intended endpoint, which is basically a potential client getting in touch. So I think a lot of people have dead ends on their site, and that should never be the case. So when you go through a testimonial or a client case study, you get to the bottom of the page. It's like, now what? It's like, okay, well, now click here to get in touch or whatever. So think of it like, to use an analogy, you ever see those marble runs where you put the marble on at the top and it can go like one of 7 different directions, but it always ends up at the same endpoint at the bottom. So it's like, whatever path they take through your portfolio, it should end up with them getting in touch with you. It's either that or they end up leaving.
I'm literally writing this down because that is such a gold point.
It is a good point.
That, though, I suppose we're still talking about actual website, because I'm thinking a lot of people get stuff straight through Dribbble, and you have no control over them. All you can do is post work, and you have no way of of directing them. So, like, Behance is something that a lot of people get through work. So I think sometimes it's out of your control unless it's your own website.
Wait, what do you mean? Dribbble lets you put links and different things in all over the place. In fact, they even have a hire me thing.
Yeah. But that's, you obviously you want to, on Dribbble, make sure that you're on the pro version so they got that button. But you can't change how everything looks. You can't funnel them, because the only thing you could do is when you post something, have something linked through there to about contacting you. But a lot of these people, someone I follow on Twitter posted about where he gets his work. A guy called Dan Petty, and he said Behance 0%, Dribbble 20%, his own website 0%, and then it was relationships like 80%. Yeah, and so for me, I don't really get any Dribbble work through Dribbble or Behance. A lot of it comes through Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. So
I've got a question for you guys. Have you guys ever had a referral scheme? You ever used that?
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Way too complicated.
For my business, but not for... Or yeah, actually I used it for my graphic design business too when I was doing client work.
Interesting. How did you find that? Because I've only experienced that with agencies for like ads and social media and that kind of thing. I've never actually seen a designer do it, but I'm kind of thinking, well, why not? Like if you have loyal clients and you're like, here's an extra incentive, like, you know, we give you a £100 gift voucher or 20% off your next project or whatever it might be to recommend a friend.
Yeah, that's exactly what I did. I had a lot of, because I used to be in banking, I had a lot of friends at banks, and I knew that people that work at banks open a lot of accounts for brand new businesses, which is perfect for looking for clients. So I contacted the people. So I contacted the people that opened these accounts, and I said, for every person that you send my way that hires me, I will give you X, which in some cases was a financial reward. In other cases, it was a gift. And that did drive a decent amount of referrals.
It's very innovative.
Yeah, you can definitely tell you went to business school out of the four of
Yeah.
us.
Well, it was very obvious working from a bank. Like, just from being in the bank, I was like, this is, to me in my brain, it was like, of course, a bank. That's where people go when they first want to start businesses.
While we're thinking about portfolios, then I think we've touched a lot on the kind of work, perhaps how to drive clients there and stuff. I guarantee something that some of the listeners are going to be wondering is, okay, what about how I actually present myself? Because we've gone in depth about the work, but I think the scary part for a lot of people is like, well, what's my big like opening headline going to be on my portfolio? How do I stand out? You know, do I put a big thing on my face being like, hey, I'm Tom, work with me, you know? And I feel like everything's so overdone. You know, it's like, hey, here's why you should hire me. And some people are trying to be like wacky to stand out, but then that comes across as trite. So it's like, I feel really the answer is it should be personal to every designer and they should let their personality flow through. But have we got any tips or thoughts on how to achieve that?
Well, I definitely, as you said, you got to be yourself. But I do think people relate to people, so you got to whether it's taking a photograph of yourself or get somebody to take a photograph of you working at your desk or maybe drawing or whatever it is that you love doing. I think people relate to that. And then I would, you know, the copy, you've got to think of how the client thinks and what they would want to know about you or what you offer them. But as I said, you don't have to be some huge copyright guru. You can just be, you know, simple and basic and be yourself and be genuine and sincere. And if you keep it short and keep it simple, I think it'll do the job.
I'll tell you something which I actually find really appealing on people's portfolios is when they are just positive and passionate and enthusiastic in their texts. So, which I think, you know, we are about what we do, and hopefully a lot of people listening, the whole point is they love what they do. So I wouldn't go stilted, like, this is my portfolio, see my work below. That's not going to grab people. I always love it when I land and it's like, hey, I'm Sally, and there's nothing I love more than designing illustrations all day, and I would love to design your next one because this is my favorite thing in the world. And when that positivity shines through, I'm like, oh, that sounds like she'd be fun to work with.
Yeah. All things being equal, someone positive is going to get the job, no question.
True.
That's a great thought, Dustin. I couldn't agree more. Just
just
trying to bring some positivity. Okay, so how about taking it a step further? We're talking a bit about that homepage. Actually, while we're on the homepage, anything else? Like any good examples you can think of something that really stood out to you?
Things I don't go on many, like we were saying, I don't go on many people's websites. I just go on their feeds, and it's like, you know, if I want to see their work, I like Behance. Actually, I'd go, like, if someone listed their where their work was at, I would go Behance, because there's more images on there. Because I was looking today, I was just looking at a guy called Ben Johnson who does like murals on walls, lettering murals on walls. He had a list of things, and when you search for his name, and I went to his Behance first. I follow him on Instagram, but I went on his Behance first because he's got like a project of this word, like hustle, on a wall. but it's broken down. It's got like a video with like a drone shot and all that. It's really cool. And then it's got, individual really good Class C photos, all for that just one project. And I think for Behance, it gives you that opportunity. Whereas in Dribbble, you have like one main photo. You can put other photos, but it's not as, project focused.
Yeah.
And I was like, actually, I don't want to go to the website. I'll just go to, because majority of the time, and it's the same with me, the website is harder to update than social feed, especially one aimed at designers.
I think it really depends on who your client is too. If you have, because if you're, I just Googled you, Ian, and even though you have a bazillion Instagram followers, somehow your own personal website comes up above it. And I feel like if you're a small business looking to hire someone, you might not know that Dribbble or Behance or any of these places are even a place that exists. And if you do, it might not be the place you decide to go to look for clients. You probably just go to the thing that says their name, that's their website. Whereas if you're some gigantic big company looking for a one-off, you might be in the know like, say Ian is, and go to a social site.
I still believe that even if you've gone to the social site and you're serious about hiring somebody, you're going to want to know a little bit more about that person. And I think the next step is they go to your website to find out more about you. That's what I think.
It depends on the client you want, because I've done both local clients and I've done both international clients. Local clients will go to your website because majority, it's a bit summarizing everyone, but they're like mainly quite old school and might go to your website. International clients or big brands will go through Instagram, they go through Behance, and they will go through Dribbble because that is stuff they use anyway. Because if it's a client, if it's like a brand, take Adidas, Adidas don't get in contact with you. The design department and the branding agency get in contact with you. So they are people already using these platforms. So you have to think, okay, if I want to go big, then I'm going to make more of an effort on these ones. If I want to stay local and I just want to do stuff, maybe, more with people around my towns or whatever, then you go more focused on your website. I suppose, it's generalizing a bit, but that's how it's worked for me. So
that's really good advice, actually. And I hadn't thought about that. I do think perhaps most of the listeners are not in the big leagues quite as much, which is fine. But I do think there's validity to the point of having a website for that reason. But that is great advice. And so maybe you should think about positioning your work differently on both. So on social, maybe you are kind of positioning it in a way to be more attractive to agencies and people of that nature. And on your website, you're aiming it more at your traditional client who maybe isn't as design savvy as an agency person.
And the thing is, it also goes back to where we're doing about niching and about doing, it also works with that sort of thing. Local people will want a one-stop shop, whereas branding agencies specifically want custom work because they've already got designers. So they would want someone who specializes in a certain area. So that's why they got in contact with me, because I was specializing in lettering. If I was still just doing general design, they wouldn't need me because they already got someone like me. So that's where you have to make up. I suppose it's making up your mind, like with finding your style, is finding what do I want to do? Do I want to work with brands or do I want to work with just keep it local? And it's fine if you want to keep it local, keep it local. If you want to,
but I definitely think it depends on what you do, because if I look at me, I'd say 99% of my inquiries for custom work comes through my website. So I think it depends on, I don't know.
What clients are they?
So it's either fabric design clients, people who want me to design fabric or actually do illustration work for them. Every now and then I get the logo requests, and it's all through my website.
And I bet some of them did find you on social, and as you said before, they kind of get funneled back to your website because that's a familiar point of contact.
Exactly. I just think that depends on the work, because I think your stuff is more, as you said, more agency driven stuff. So I think it depends on the work that you do. I think people, especially if they're small businesses, they feel they want to know the person a little bit more first before they approach you. And that's, as you said, and that's why the local guy is going to want to go to your website. It again all totally depends on who your client is going to be and the work you want.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps as just a general thought to remember about all this, the only thing you control, whatever you're doing, is your website. At any moment, and this has happened, there's examples of this all through the past, at any moment, Instagram can decide that they're going to charge you massive amounts to hit 98% of your customers and only show you 2%. I mean, you don't know what they're going to do. So, and this happens constantly. In fact, we should all know by now that eventually the end game is for them all to do this.
Yeah.
They always say if you can't figure out what they're selling, you're the thing they're selling. So just remember, you should have a portfolio or you should have your own website that you control 100%.
Yeah, I agree, Dustin. But the thing is, the only real control is if you have an email list or a client list or a newsletter or something like that, because even your website, most clients for the first time are either going to find you through social, which is subject to the same issues, or through Google, which is also subject to the same issues if they change an algorithm or something like that, or people are bidding for your terms more or whatever it might be. So I know what you mean, and having that own space, that personal space that, you know, is your kind of home online.
Mm-hmm.
I love having that control, and that does feel safer than just relying on something like Facebook. But I think having the awareness that really you're kind of always beholden to someone rather, you know, whether it's Google or Facebook or whoever.
You are, and you should just expand. Perhaps the better way to say it is you should expand as much backup nets as you can that you can control more, because there's no question these other things are going to find ways to make money, and you're likely part of it, and controlling how much traffic goes to you will be a part of that plan. But you're absolutely right. It's something we have to work with.
Although at the same time, if you're being innovative and staying ahead of the curve, that's not necessarily a negative. So when Google ads launched or when Facebook ads launched, people made a killing before everyone else caught up with that.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as you're kind of looking for the white space and looking for what the opportunities are there, that isn't, you know, when everyone else is sat around moaning about how they're not getting the reach they used to, there's other people working out how to make it work for their advantage.
True.
I guess that's like the luck of it too, or that's the beauty of it too, because you're right. They'll come up with the ads or whatever, and then I believe what they call it is they wait. There's a time gap between when something starts like an ad and when it actually gets to the point where it's market efficient, or what do they call it, marketing efficiency. So you have that area where ads are cheap because not enough people are on there yet, and you're getting great deals. Then it gets harder and harder to convert. But then someone else comes out. It's a Snapchat or it's a whatever it is, the new thing is, and that one will open things up. So for instance, like right now, Snapchat, now you can flip, or Instagram stories, you can flip up and have a link all of a sudden. It's the first time you can have a link on Instagram, but it's because they're trying to get everyone on it. So these opportunities are always popping up.
Yeah, but just take advantage. I think hopefully a lot of what we've talked about today is about having awareness and also learning to be a bit deliberate. So just starting to think about all of these aspects of not only is, you know, what's happening on your portfolio, but what's happening around it, what's happening with the people using it, what's happening on your social profiles, just all of these things. Hopefully this episode is kind of guiding people to stop and think about them for a moment rather than just let them happen to them. And then when you get a bit more self-aware, then, as I say, you can get more deliberate, hopefully, with your efforts to control those and benefit from them, and be a bit more deliberate with the types of clients you want, the number of clients you want, how you're converting them, how you're presenting yourself, being aware of your image. Like, I think all of that stuff is important, and it shouldn't just happen by happy accident. You know, you should be driving that. Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode. We hope that it gave you plenty of tips and ideas for how to improve your design portfolio and hopefully land some great new clients in the process. As always, you can find full show notes over at honestdesigners.com or find us over on iTunes by searching for The Honest Designers Show. If today's episode helped you at all, then you know the score. It would mean so much to us if you took just a moment to leave a review on iTunes. Seriously, if you popped over there right now and left us some quick feedback, we would all appreciate it so much. And feel free to leave your name, email, any way we can get in touch, because we would love to reach out and thank you. Thanks again for tuning in, and we will see you next week right here for more design discussion on the Honest Designers Show.